Okay, so Queer as Folk, Season 1, Episode 5, now Approaching the Line. It was directed by Carrie Skoglund and written by Jason Schaefer, and it first aired January 7th, 2001 in the US and February 2nd, 2001 in Canada. Okay, so whenever I watch this episode, I think, oh, this is the end of all the narration at the beginning of the episode that we had in the first 4 episodes, with Michael doing some voiceover narration in the beginning. Every time I get to this episode, I'm like, oh, okay, the narration is done now. But then I find out that's not the case in the episode after this one. But oh well. So there's no narration here. So Brian wakes up in bed next to someone, doesn't really seem to remember the guy, and I'm honestly just so shocked that someone spent the night. Like, Brian doesn't strike me as someone who likes or lets people stay the night, but oh well. I think this is more for just having the awkward situation of when Lindsay walks in and sees that guy there. Anyways, Lindsay shows up with Gus for an unexpected visit. And do we remember in the last episode when Brian showed up for a visit at their house and Melanie was all like, oh, you should call first.
Hello, oh baby, hello, baby. Hello.
Brian just looks at him like, what?
We'll do this again.
So Brian still isn't visiting Melanie and Lindsay's house very much, and it seems to be because Brian knows that Melanie doesn't want him there.
She's just jealous because she thinks you love me more than you love her.
I mean, I don't know. I think it's probably more equal, right? I think it's equally as much. And Lindsay is looking really cute with that bandana that she's got. But Brian doesn't seem to be mad or upset about having a kid now or having a kid with Lindsay. Also the way he's looking and holding at Gus. So the last episode we saw that he was kind of sticking up for his son because that was really important to him. And then now we kind of see that again here too.
We all have to get along.
I'll try.
So he is willing to try. And I think he is. And I think this seems to say that he was kind of kidding around before. Lindsay seems really desperate for them to get along, just the way that she says that. And I don't blame her. Like, it must be really tough and not fun at all when you're trying to parent your child and then the other 2 parents involved are just at each other's throats constantly. And I kind of wonder if Lindsay thought that having Brian be the father of her and Melanie's baby would also kind of maybe help with Melanie's animosity towards him. I don't know. And then Lindsay asked Brian over for dinner to try and smooth things over between the 3 of them.
There's a chicken thing I want to try. It has 40 cloves. Could you stomach that?
Am I crazy or does that just sound like way too much garlic? Like that's a lot. Like that's a lot. Like no, Lindsay, I do not think that I can stomach that. Is that not way too much garlic? I don't know much about cooking, so maybe I'm wrong, but it just seems like a lot of garlic. Dinner will be early on Friday, so he can still hit the bars. And they seem to go out to the bars and the clubs every single night of the week, so I guess it doesn't really matter what day it is. We're at the Big Q.
We did coupons at the end, and that one expired in 1992.
Michael is talking to Marley, and he needs help with inventory. And then Marley makes it clear to us that inventory is not a desirable job to have.
Mike, if you need someone to stay late, I'm free.
You are?
Tracy seems really excited about it. So Justin and Jennifer are in therapy.
We used to share things. We enjoyed each other. But now I talk to him, he slams the door, runs away. And he lies. He says he's spending the night at Daphne's, but I know he's not.
To be honest, this sounds like what a lot of teenagers do, not just the gay ones. But I guess it's especially hard for Jennifer because they used to be so close from the sounds of it. So Justin is sitting there, and he seems to be unwrapping a lot of Werther's. Clearly he's just kind of like distracting himself, not really taking part in what's happening between his mom and the therapist. He's just kind of keeping his hands busy and focusing on that and not the therapy session. Justin just isn't engaging at all. Seems kind of almost tired by it.
He's only 17. He's too young to be having those feelings, to be... Justin, how can you possibly know now who you are?
I think that Jennifer's trying to come to terms with this. She's figuring everything out right now, just like Justin is. I mean, not just like Justin is, but you know. And she's really trying by going to therapy and trying to get him to open up and to communicate with her, which is something that he's clearly not been doing for a long time now. She just desperately wants to connect with her son again. And we've been seeing that even before now. She's probably feeling really hurt by him not engaging with her at all, and by how he's been acting. And she's honestly probably kind of lonely without him. And I understand all that. I get all that. Jennifer is not perfect. Some of the things that she says here I think are just her working through it. Obviously she's not saying all the right things. She's trying, and that's what I see here. She's definitely making some mistakes. And I know how to Justin saying something like that to him, like how could you possibly know who you are, is pretty hurtful. Like he doesn't know himself when he does. Let's not forget that in the last episode he was really freaking out because his mom knew. I mean, he kind of ran away from home for like a second, but he was really freaking out about it. And I think that he's just terrified of those consequences, and those consequences. And then he says this famous little...
I like dick. I want to get fucked by dick. I want to suck dick. I like sucking dick. And I'm good at it, too.
So Justin states his feelings on the whole thing pretty honestly, very bluntly, maybe a little bit too bluntly for right in front of his mother, but I think that he also probably says this for a bit of that shock factor too.
Brian!
He can't help it. He's only 17.
I mean, what he says is the truth, but it's very blunt, especially when your mother's like sitting right beside you. Yeah, but I love the therapist's face here, and especially his mom's. I just love her face. She's like, "What? What is this? Did you just say that in front of me? Seriously?" But he's like, "You don't think I know who I am or what I want, but I know that this is what I want. So, do you think I'm gay? Maybe." So Brian is at work and he wants to market towards males aged 18 to 34. Because, of course, he does. And then Mr. Telson doesn't exactly seem sold. He's the client that they're trying to land.
Brian is our most dynamic and creative account exec. His campaigns have won Clio Awards for us.
Good job, Brian. And then we're back on Liberty Avenue at the diner.
If I don't get this account, I'll be fucked. And without lube.
And that's a bad thing?
It's amazing how you always work anal intercourse into the conversation.
I mean, it really, really is.
And you try spending an evening with some backslapping breeder from Altoona, smoking cigars and talking about pussy.
Also, pretty sure Altoona is just a reference here to Harvey Milk. Sorry for this history lesson. Just the first openly gay elected official in California, and he mentions Altoona in his Hope speech in reference to a place with not many gay people, or a place where the gay people who live there could, have hope when there's elected officials and etc. and whatever and all that. But anyway, basically it's just like a place where there's, I want to say Middle America, but it's not Middle America, is it? I don't know where Middle America is. I have no idea. Things are good between Michael and his mother. So Ted is at the diner too, and we're reminded by him about his recent near-death experience.
Woody's in Babylon are no longer deductible expenses.
So he's not really ready to go back to that scene after everything that happened the last time that he went out. So he can go to the diner and hang out with his friends and do stuff like that, but he doesn't want to go back to the world with all the drugs and the hot twinks. Also, Ted is really just like not affected at all by this coma. I mean, like physically. He's got like nothing. He's up and at 'em. He's ready to go. He spent 3 days in the hospital napping and stuff, and he's good now. Those 24-hour comas, Emmett looks really concerned for Ted.
I'll be back. Looks like it's just us, the 3 Musketeers.
Which kind of seems to go along with that thing that we kind of saw in the last episode where Brian was talking about, Ted isn't like us, kind of putting the 3 of them in a separate thing from their thing with Ted, and also them not being too upset about Ted's inevitable demise, which turned out to be very inevitable.
She's not my bride-to-be.
Then you can tell her who you really are.
I agree. I always say, come clean, or don't come at all.
Again, showing us that Emmett and Brian are very similar, especially in their outlook on life. Honesty and being true to yourself and living as you are.
Where I work, they laugh at faggots.
And the only faggots worth laughing at are the ones who don't tell the truth.
Obviously, you can make an argument for both sides of this thing. Like, yeah, you should be able to be honest with people about who you are. But like I said before, Michael's concerns are very real and valid about what could happen if he came out at work. For him right now, and how he feels is that it's safest for him if he stays in the closet at work. And if that's how he feels, then, so be it. But then Brian says,
and stop leading her on.
It's just really not kind what he's doing to Tracy, and he really keeps this up for a long time, but, he keeps leading her on, and it's just not very nice. She obviously really thinks that there's a chance for the 2 of them when there's not, and you just know that her feelings are going to get hurt worse the longer that this goes on. I don't know. I guess you can make up some kind of excuse or something, but I feel like you should just let her know, like, Tracy, I'm so sorry, this isn't going to happen. I don't know.
Don't touch me.
And we see again that while Emmett and Brian do agree on a lot of things, which we just saw right before this, and how they're similar in a lot of ways, Emmett just doesn't like Brian very much. Doesn't really think that he's all that like everybody else does. And it's basically just him and Melanie in that camp. Like, they're the only ones who aren't like just, so impressed with everything Brian does. And so Michael's at the store doing inventory.
In feminine hygiene, I'm checking panty liners. Heavy on light days and light on heavy days.
Haha. I get it, but it kind of feels like she thinks that this is like a sexy thing for them to be talking about. I feel like it's very much not, though. I think they could have, I don't know. I mean, the lingerie section's right there. You can see it, but whatever.
Marley says no one knows what you're really like. That you probably lead this double life.
I just think that Marley needs to mind her own business. She's acting all cutesy and friendly with Michael to his face, and then just gossiping about him behind his back, and I hate people like that. I hate it. He says that she's right.
I developed a strange power to see into people's minds, to read their most private thoughts. And since then, I set out to prevent crimes before they happen.
Oh, laser man. What am I thinking?
And I mean, she's not wrong, you know, for thinking that that's where he was going with that, from how he was acting very close, very intense. I get how she got there. I mean, he climbed up there, he climbed up that ladder, he got right in her face. And so I think from Michael's perspective, he was just really excited about the whole superhero thing, getting into that and kind of getting into character. But how could he not see how his words would come off? Like, how can he not? Michael, come on. So anyways, Michael turns around and then just walks right off the ladder. He just walks right off of it. Okay, I get that he's like, you know, kind of flustered and whatever, and he just wants to get out of there as soon as possible, but and how do you forget that you're on a ladder when you're up so high? You know, like that's not your normal view. I don't know. I guess he was just, but he really just steps off of it like he's Wile E. Coyote or something. So Justin is at Woody's and he's shirtless. Apparently if you take off your shirt, you get a free drink.
You should go home. Your mom's probably worried sick.
And he's right, his mother is worried sick.
She took me to a fucking waste of time therapist.
Maybe she's trying to understand you.
Brian kind of says that with like a joking-y voice, but in a way that's like, no, that's what I actually mean. He's right, and he's trying to show Justin that a little bit. From what we learn of Brian's family later on, you can see why he would say that. Apparently, Brian never told his parents that he was gay.
It's not their life. I don't need their approval.
Okay, so first of all, I love that line, because I think that he's right. Sure, it'd be really nice to have a mom like Debbie, who's going to be just super, super cool with it, but not all parents are like that. Not all people are like that. It isn't their life. They're not living it that way. Why does he need them to approve of it, of his life? Especially when he knows that they probably wouldn't approve. And, you know, he's going to do it either way. He's going to do what he wants either way, so it doesn't really matter what they think about it. Those are just my thoughts. But second of all, this is obviously a really sharp contrast to before, when he was telling Michael to be honest, to be who he is, and not to hide, basically. Sharp contrast because, and I don't know, kind of hypocritical, because that's exactly what he did with his parents. He knew that nothing good would come of him coming out to them, or that it wasn't necessary for him, so he didn't. And that's kind of like Michael at work, except for the whole Tracy thing and that part of it. So Brian's kind of a hypocrite here. So then Justin sees Daphne coming into the bar.
My mom answered. She said you weren't there. I didn't know what to do.
And we see that she's brought Jennifer to the bar with her. So this always kind of bugs me a little bit. Really, Daphne? You didn't know what to do? Maybe like, don't bring her to the bar? She could have just said that she didn't know where Justin was, because did she even really know for sure that that's where he would be, or was she just guessing that that's probably where he was? She's not a great cover person. I mean, I get she was probably being pressured from her mom too, but still. She could have just been like, if she absolutely had to, he's probably at a bar or something, but I don't know where, which one. I don't know, I just feel like there were other options. But I also get that she's a 17-year-old and her mom is, telling her to do something, so I get that too, but ugh. Oh, now I get why Daphne's grounded. Daphne's grounded because she lied about where Justin was. Oh, I did not connect those dots. Okay. We also see that Mr. Telson sees that Brian is at Woody's, and he looks very pleased by that. We're back at the lesbian's house.
He's a good person.
He's a selfish shithead.
Maybe, but he's honest. And he tells the truth and he doesn't pretend.
Yeah, well, I wish he'd try.
I wish you would too.
So Melanie takes off her shirt and heads upstairs, I guess to seduce Lindsay into dropping it. I love Lindsay's face here though. It's kind of like, ugh, she's done it again. I also love that she picks up Melanie's shirt off the ground. Melanie thinks that Brian is really selfish. He is, but he also cares about other people too. We've seen this with him, with Michael and Lindsay, his son, even Justin kind of at the end of 102, and many others have this opinion too, we've seen.
Because you're a heartless shit?
Lindsay says that he's honest and everything, and that's true as well, and Melanie is kind of just ignoring these parts, which is kind of odd because those are a lot of Melanie's qualities too. She's honest, and she tells the truth, and she doesn't pretend. Her and Brian are just so similar, which is why I think they clash a lot and don't really get along, and it's just kind of interesting that these are the two people that Lindsay loves most, because they're very similar. Anyways, the conversation ends with Melanie not agreeing to this dinner, and then she uses sex to distract Lindsay from it and to move on from it. Whereas by the end of Lindsay's conversation with Brian, he basically agreed to go to the dinner. I think that Lindsay holds more power over Brian and can get him to do things, but why she's able to do that is because he really cares about her and her feelings, partly. And I also kind of think that Brian definitely hates Melanie less than she hates him. Brian brings some guy back to the loft, and then Justin shows up.
Why don't you get lost, you little asshole?
I will see her first.
Better yet, why don't you?
And this is quite a change from the last time that Justin showed up there at the loft. In 102, he told Justin to leave when he had someone there, and then Justin did leave, and he only went after him because that guy, what was his name? George? Father Goodfuck? What was his first name? Was it George? But he only left because he told him to, but this time, this guy tells Justin to leave, and then Brian just turns around and tells him to leave, and lets Justin say, "Can you say progress?"
I'm not your lover. I'm not your partner. I'm not even your friend. You're not anything to me.
I mean, they have been together a few times now. And there was that first night, and then he even took him to his son's birth. They were dancing at Babylon, and then went back to the loft. And then there was that thing in Michael's childhood bedroom. You can see why Justin might think that there's at least something between them. And I think that a lot of this is Brian trying to convince himself of this too. I mean, he definitely doesn't even realize or see for himself what's kind of happening or forming-ish. The fact that they've even had more than one encounter is, he's never done that before, so.
Could be. If you gave me a chance.
Where did you learn to talk like that? Watching some teen drama?
This is my chance to actually show her how much I care.
Because that's what you're taught to think. We all need each other. Well, it's a crock of shit. You're the only one you need. You're the only one you've got.
Okay, so this quote is just incredibly sad. He thinks that the only person he can truly count on is himself, and that he doesn't need anyone else. I mean, his actions kind of seem to go against this, though, with Michael and Lindsay. But anyways, what I always kind of think here is a thing with people need people thing. Oh, and then the way that Brian, caresses Justin's face, and then Justin's, hopeful smile. I think Brian definitely feels for Justin and his situation right now, and maybe he even feels a little bit guilty about it, but Brian says that he can sleep on the couch just for tonight. I don't know, I just think that it shows a lot that Brian sent home that trick. He lets Justin sleep on his couch. It doesn't seem like he would do that for most people, especially not someone who doesn't mean anything to him. Michael's neck is stiff from last night.
You need a chiropractor. A friend of mine's fiance goes to someone who does some of the Steelers.
I feel like he'd be really expensive though if he does some of the Steelers. Wouldn't he be a really expensive chiropractor? Do we think that Michael has very good health insurance? So she still thinks that there is a chance for the two of them, and he doesn't dissuade her from that at all. He's just keeping her on the hook.
He wants to chew me a second, asshole.
I always thought you could use one of those.
Oh, Cynthia! Every time I see her on the screen during an episode, I just kind of yell out at my TV, her name. Oh, how I love you. I'm so glad to see her again. Oh, I love how her and Brian joke with each other. See, they're close-ish. I want more.
Like this club that I heard about, Babylon.
Oh my god, the way that Marvin says Babylon kills me every time. Babylon. Babylon.
Why, Marvin, you old dog.
Christ, isn't anyone straight anymore?
I love that line. Also, Marvin seems really pleased about the whole thing. But also, I mean, really, everyone that Brian encounters seems to be gay. It's funny how it basically gets to a point in the series where my baseline for every character that comes in is just to assume that they're gay until someone tells me that they're not, if they're not, which makes sense because the show is called Queer as Folk. It's just kind of a really nice change of pace. And speaking of everyone being gay, we meet Michael's chiropractor. So this is the first time that we meet Dr. David Cameron. I know that opinions on him are mixed, to say the least. I'm not quite sure why Michael took his shirt off. Maybe this is just something that some chiropractors do, but whenever I've gone to a chiropractor, you leave all your clothes on. I've heard of some chiropractors that get you to put on a gown, a hospital gown, but not quite sure why he took his shirt off. I don't know, maybe this chiropractor maybe that's just how Dr. David does it. I also feel like Michael's work should be paying for this since he got hurt on the job. I mean, it was completely his own fault that he got hurt on the job, but I still feel like they should be footing the bill for this. And maybe they are. Maybe that's how he can afford him. I don't know. I'm sure that no one cares, but I just want to know more about this situation. Who is paying for this? I just want to know. Michael is really enjoying the chiropractic until he's reminded of why he's there. We see Jennifer Taylor and she shows up at the diner. Jennifer!
Sunshine's mom. How's Justin?
He didn't come home last night, and I was hoping you might have seen him.
So what does Dad say?
He doesn't know. You don't even know what I was going to say.
Yeah, I do. Because I ask myself all the same things.
So Debbie asked herself all those same questions too, so she knows exactly where Jennifer's coming from right now because she's been there.
He told his therapist that he likes dick.
There, you see, you already have something in common. I'm sure you were thinking you'd probably never have anything to share again.
I love how Jennifer just kind of smiles at this. It's nice. Some levity for her, finally.
The thing he's the most afraid of, even more than his dad finding out and beating the shit out of him, is that you will stop loving him.
I could never do that.
Then you be sure he knows he hasn't lost you.
And yeah, maybe Justin is pushing away his mom so much because he's afraid that she won't love him anymore. Also because he's kind of figuring everything out. But yeah, I think that Debbie's right here. I think that that's why he's been so awful to his mom lately and just running from her. Because for him, that's better than her telling him that she doesn't love him anymore. Which would never happen. Which, I mean, there was that thing in the first episode of the show where...
My mom says sometimes she wished she never had me.
I mean, this is part of the reason why I just think that that was one of those inconsistencies in those first few episodes that whatever, that's how I choose to view that. Or that Justin is lying. Because we do see Justin lie again in 104 about his dad finding out and all that. So I think that either Justin's lying or it's an inconsistency because that just doesn't line up with the Jennifer that we see in the show and especially that we see right here. I just don't think that Jennifer would ever say that.
If it's okay with you, I'd like to just lie here for a couple minutes.
Don't be embarrassed. Happens all the time.
I married young before I knew. By the time I realized what I was, it was too late to change things. I love my wife and my kids. Why should I destroy all that?
So you take care of business while you're away, taking care of business.
And then Marvin kind of makes it clear that he's interested in Brian.
However, there is somebody I'm interested in.
The next day, Brian is driving Michael.
That's sexual harassment.
So Brian is considering doing it, Marvin, in exchange for his account. So Brian's kind of like, oh, I've done some sketchy things, so why not do this too?
Yeah, but that was for fun. You've never done anything like this.
We also have this shot throughout the scene of Brian's face in the rearview mirror, and this is the first of 3 mirror shots that we see of Brian in the episode. And I think, you know, at this moment right here, it's just kind of showing us that Brian isn't really recognizing himself right now. He's not acting like himself or how he usually does. And we also have Michael here telling him that this isn't him, although this will be spelled out for us later on in the episode. Brian, mirror, not himself. We can see that. And Michael is telling him in this moment, you are not acting like yourself. Brian seems to be on the I'm gonna do it side, even though the fact that he's talking about it with Michael right now and how he's talking about it, like considering some of the other things I've done, he's obviously not completely okay with it. Jennifer shows up at Justin's school in her car and she asks Justin to come with her and he's just not interested at all.
Stop running from me because I'm not running from you!
I love that. It's so true. She's letting him know that he doesn't have to keep pushing her away and running from her as a coping mechanism for not having to deal with her pushing him away, because she's not. She's not pushing him away. She's not running from him. She still loves him.
I'm still your mother, and you're still my son, and I still love you.
Which I think is what he really just needed to hear. And this really seems to get through to Justin, finally. And I just love the way that she kind of shakes her head. Like, yeah, that's it. I'm still here.
And I wanted to ask if you'd like to have dinner with me. Remember that little problem you had at my table?
Yeah, but you said that even happens to football players.
Only the gay ones.
Justin's mom has taken Justin to an art gallery, a museum, yeah, I guess. An art museum, a museum with art.
You know, if it weren't for me, you wouldn't be an artist. I mean, I encouraged you.
So art was clearly something that they both used to share. Apparently they used to go there all the time.
After we're done, you want to share a piece of that incredible chocolate cake, like we used to?
Yeah, sure.
Things seem to be a lot better between them, and they're kind of back to normal, or so we think. So she sees her favorite painting while Justin sees some guy, and she's talking about how she fell in love with it when she was pregnant with him and even put it in the birth announcement. And Justin is not listening at all, and he's just checking out that guy. The guy kind of nods and heads off, and Justin says that he needs to go to the bathroom. And at the end, she kind of notices him walking off with that guy. So they're making out in a bathroom stall, and Justin closes the door, and this is intercut with his mom looking at the painting of a mother holding her baby, and she almost looks kind of sad, but more in a way that's just her thinking that those days are gone now, of me holding him and taking care of him, because he's his own person now who can do whatever he wants, and I can't protect him or be there for him or understand him like I used to. So she had thought that things were back to normal between the two of them, like how they were before all of this started happening. You know, going to the museum together, looking at that painting, sharing some chocolate cake. But what she realizes in this moment is that they never can be. He knows who he is now and he's not going to change or hide it. But I also think that this happens with all kids and parents, no matter of their sexual orientation. Like when they start kind of being their own person and going off and dating people. Obviously it's, you know, still different, but you know what I mean. Also, is it not just like really bold of Justin to do that while his mom is sitting out there? You know, like he came there with his mom and then he just goes into the bathroom with some guy.
A doctor?
A chiropractor.
What's old?
Older than you. Probably 40.
That is old.
I feel like Ted is just really happy not to be the oldest one at the moment. Also, I guess I'll point out right here that the age difference between Michael and David is about the same as between Brian and Justin. Obviously, it's much more okay for a 29-year-old to be dating a 40-year-old than for a 17-year-old to be seeing a 29-year-old. Also, just want to mention that David's name is David Cameron, and in the UK version of the show, his first name was Cameron. His name was Cameron Roberts. I also was always curious how old Chris Potter was at the time, who played Dr. David, and he was also 40 at the time. Michael tells them where Dr. David is taking him. Emmett and Ted both know of it right away and that it's a really expensive and fancy place, but Michael just has absolutely no clue. They seem to know a lot more about things than he does, I think just because he's so stuck kind of still being like a child, or childlike.
It's my sworn duty to make sure you are properly attired.
So he ends up dressing him like Emmett would dress, which seems a little off to me, but I get the joke here, obviously. Because Emmett's like, oh, a doctor is taking you to a really fancy restaurant, so you have to wear the right thing. And I feel like Emmett would be able to tell that that wasn't the right thing to wear on a date with a doctor at a really fancy, expensive restaurant, right? I feel like he would know that, but oh well, whatever. I guess, you know, for the sake of the joke. Brian hears about Michael having a date, and Brian seems genuinely happy about this, you know, with the smile and the hug.
I'm gonna call and cancel.
The fuck you are.
He's maybe probably kind of happy that Michael might start to move on and be into someone else other than him. So Brian gets some clothes for him to wear, and they seem to be brand new clothes that he's just purchased.
You ever been on a real date? Once. I ended up fucking the waiter.
It's just so crazy to me to ever think of Brian actually taking the time to go on a date with someone, to say yes to that, or even to ask someone. I mean, it's crazy, am I right? I wonder how that happened. Like, how did that happen? How long ago was it? But, of course, you know, he ended up doing the waiter instead.
I don't know what to do or say. Just be yourself.
And he seems pretty genuine when he says that. Honestly, I just can't believe that Brian is pro-date here. I think just goes to show even more that he wants what's good for Michael. You know, he probably thinks it'll be good for him and good for him to be really interested in someone else. I mean, we'll see if that lasts, though.
Why can't we just fast forward to the sex? The point of a date, or so it's been explained to me by those who do that sort of thing, is that you actually get to know the other person before you fuck them.
I just really can't believe he's pro-date.
What if you don't like them? Worse yet, what if you do?
And that is them right there. For Brian, the worst scenario is if you actually like the person.
Sex is something you only have with complete strangers. People you'll never see again unless you just bump into them on the street, but never with someone you might actually give a shit about.
I think that Brian is so scared of losing people that he loves or likes, and so, you know, he wouldn't have sex with Michael because that could mess up their relationship and, you know, could cause him to lose him. And let's not forget that Brian has seen what love leads to.
Love is something that straight people tell themselves they're in so they can get laid. And then they end up hurting each other because it was all based on lies to begin with.
So it doesn't really hold love in a very high regard. This is going to make a lot more sense later on when we find out more about his backstory, but it's interesting to just kind of start to think about that now. So Michael has gone from dressing like Emmett to dressing like Brian.
I think I look like you.
And obviously, neither of them is him. It's really interesting because Brian just told him to be himself, but then he's dressing him like Brian. But I guess there weren't really any other options at that point because Michael was on his way to the date, so maybe he couldn't stop back by his apartment. And I guess if Michael truly doesn't have any nice clothes at all, but I mean, he could have worn one of his like dress shirts that he wears to work, right? I mean, they're not super nice, but it's better than whatever. I don't know. I guess we'll just say he didn't have time to go back to his apartment.
I'm entertaining a client. You're not gonna go through with it. You're so cute.
So then Brian looks at himself in the mirror, and this is mirror check number 2. I guess he's just really contemplating what he's about to do and who he is and all of that. Can I do this? Because he's still a little bit conflicted about it. And we see that in his response to Michael too. And also he's just he's not recognizing himself in the mirror right now. And Michael was just looking in the mirror and saying he didn't look like him, he looked like Brian. And now Brian is looking in the mirror and he's not himself either. And the person who's about to do this isn't him. And Michael has also just reminded him of that. Just like, you know, when we saw Brian in the car mirror earlier, he kind of wasn't being himself, and Michael was telling him that this wasn't him. And again, we have here Michael telling him that this isn't him and he shouldn't do this. And Brian is just kind of not recognizing himself because he's acting like someone else. And he's still contemplating, you know, am I going to go through with this? So Lindsay and Melanie are waiting for Brian to show up for Friday night dinner. Obviously, Brian is very late. Lindsay is in denial about this. And I guess at some point off camera, Melanie agreed to this dinner because last that we saw she wasn't, but I guess she did.
When will you ever learn?
And then Lindsay looks really upset. Brian really couldn't have called or left a message saying he wasn't going to make it. I mean, like, it kind of, it's not really, but it's kind of a work thing that he's doing, right?
Wasn't sure you'd come. I always come when I say I'm going to.
And then the slow-mo that they use when he's walking up to the hotel room, and his face, he just doesn't seem very pleased. And, you know, when he puts his arm up to knock. And the script for this episode, the description says that he is dreading every step. So obviously, he's not excited about what he's about to do. And then a bellhop or something opens the door to the hotel room. And to me, it looks like he's checking Brian out. So then Michael and David are on their date at the restaurant. David gets some wine and Michael orders a Diet Pepsi because, of course, he does.
Is that Hugo Boss?
Where?
He says that it belongs to his friend Brian.
I bet he doesn't look half as good in it as you.
He looks better. He can look good in anything. He even looks good in nothing.
Good body.
Awesome. When he walks into Babylon, heads turn like police lights just to look at. Everybody wants him.
Do you?
Me? No. He's my best friend since high school. We'd never...
Good. I was starting to get jealous.
Oh, David. It's only just beginning. Michael keeps bringing up Brian throughout the date, and even when David tries to give Michael a compliment, it keeps ending up back to Brian. He just keeps going on and on about him and how great he is. I don't know, it just kind of shows, I guess, like he's obsessed with him or he's always thinking about him. I mean, he is dressed like him right now, too. But, like, Michael, it's a date. Talk about yourself. It's just off to a really bad start. Also, really, he has a straw? Oh, Michael. I think really they're just trying to make him look childish compared to David right here.
Besides, he's not even interested in me.
Which is a really key point. Reed, were he interested, it'd be a different story.
Excellent.
This is excellent, too.
Oh, Michael. I feel like a lot of this episode is just me saying, oh, Michael. Oh, David bought a bottle of wine on eBay. Michael's all excited, and then he starts talking about a comic book that he got on eBay. Oh, yeah, he is very passionate about it. Also, a little bit weird for Michael to think that David would be into that, but I guess he is sharing stuff about himself, so. But, I mean, he says it because he thinks that David would be into that, and I'm like, you can buy a lot of things on eBay. He's like, oh, good, you go on eBay too? Let me tell you about this. Anyways, I guess, in summation, Michael is not doing great on this date. It's going bad. It's going very badly.
It's like every time I find one, I'm a kid again up in my old room.
The mystery of the perpetual boy.
You have hit the nail on the head, Dr. David. He is the perpetual boy. His clothes, his demeanor, his interests, his actions, his feelings, they're all just stuck in boyhood. And David is obviously not that.
You have a beautiful body. I know.
Also, we've just heard Michael say this about Brian in the previous scene.
Good body.
Awesome.
And it's like, yeah, we know. Michael just told us. Oh, in the script, the direction for when he says I know is annoyed. And he's about to get to business when the phone rings.
You gonna get that?
So Brian kind of says that like he wants him to get it to stop this thing that's about to happen. Obviously, Marvin is told that someone is hurt. Brian then catches a glimpse of himself in the mirror. So this is the third time we see Brian look in the mirror in this episode. First was in the rearview mirror of the Jeep, and then in the mirror at his loft, and now in the mirror in this hotel room. So when the mirror thing starts in the Jeep, Brian is telling Michael about Marvin's proposition. And we can see him in the mirror. He's not sure if he should do it or not. He doesn't really seem to want to, but he also kind of seems like he's going to do it. But Michael is making him question it. And through Michael, he's sort of forced to confront what he would actually be doing. Michael, along with the mirror, is kind of, reminding him of that. Then later at the loft, when Michael comes by, the two of them look in the mirror, and Michael looks like Brian, and Brian's telling him to be himself. What Brian is doing here with Marvin is very un-Brian-like and not himself at all, to not kind of be in the dominant position in this whole encounter, but also to do something that he doesn't want to do sexually in exchange for some kind of gain at work. So anyways, again, right after Michael has left and has also just, told him that he shouldn't go through with it. Brian sees himself in the mirror and is forced to see that this isn't like him. Just like being dressed like Brian wasn't Michael. And so finally, at the hotel, he sees himself in the mirror again. He's naked in a hotel room, about to have sex with a man that he doesn't want to have sex with, and he's forced to confront what he's doing and that it isn't him. And the way that he looks at his reflection, he's almost ashamed and doesn't want to look anymore. And he looks away, and then he takes a drink to kind of get it out of his head. So Michael was kind of there for those first two mirror things, and Michael's reminding him this isn't you. But then the third time in the mirror, Brian now doesn't need Michael to be there telling him that it isn't him, because he can see it completely for himself now. So there's a real progression. So along with Brian looking great here, we've got all that mirror stuff going on. We learned that Marvin's daughter broke her arm playing basketball, and before, when he was talking about his kids, he said that she played soccer. So I guess either she plays a lot of sports, which isn't uncommon, or maybe it's also to show that he doesn't know his daughter very well, like he's not very involved with her life or her activities or any of that.
Sounds serious.
She'll be all right.
She was asking for you. She wants you to come home.
She'll understand.
Or that you're down on your knees sucking cock.
Look, there's nothing that I can do anyway.
I can.
And I actually love the music or the score that plays here. It's kind of fun and it fits the moment. So Brian picks up the phone and asks for Mr. Telson's bill because he'll be checking out immediately and he needs a car to take him to the airport. I love the kind of snarky, mocking look on his face here. And then Brian says this.
Your visit to Queer World's over, Marvin. Better go back to your wife, your kids, and your $30 million a year business. You'd be a fool to throw that away.
I think that basically Brian doesn't like or appreciate people that are living their lives pretending to be one thing with their wives and their perfect family, and then they sneak away to do the stuff they really want to do and who they, really are. So he thinks that people should just be who they are. They should be honest, no lies, which is something that's been brought up throughout this episode. Lindsay was telling Melanie that Brian is honest. Brian and Emmett were telling Michael that he should be honest. But then there's that moment about Brian's parents and that he hasn't come out to them, which is something that's going to come up again. You can already see that obviously whatever he's got going with his parents isn't great. That comment, and then the comment earlier in the episode about how you can only count on yourself. So we're going to see more about his family later. But anyways, so they're like tourists basically who go to Gay World and enjoy their little trips and all that. But anyway, so Brian doesn't really like or appreciate this. Brian was going to compromise his beliefs before, but he realized that he can't do that, no matter the price, which would be his boss is going to be really angry at him for this, for not getting the account. So he has to be who he is, and he doesn't want to enable people who are lying to their families, and especially when they treat Brian's life like a little vacation or getaway and not like real life like Brian does. And I think that in this moment with Marvin and his daughter, also obviously realizes that I wasn't there for my son tonight. I said I was going to be and I wasn't. Instead, I'm here being someone I'm not and I've let them down.
She was asking for you. She wants you to come home.
He hated seeing Marvin prioritize this and his little adventure over his child and his family, his responsibilities, which is something that Brian has done, and he doesn't like that. It's also, again, holding up a mirror to his life and his choices and what he's decided to do. So it kind of just makes him see all that and then decide to be a more part of Gus's life, and then he truly wants to be there for him. He realized in the last episode that he wanted to support his son and kind of stick up for his son and have his opinions heard when it comes to his son, to advocate for him too. But it's only now that he realizes that he wants to be a much bigger part of his life overall. He wants to be there for him in the times that he needs him. And also I love how Brian's like, oh, poor you have to go back to your super successful, rich, $30 million a year business. Also, you'd be a fool to give that up, which I think is kind of him mocking him and throwing his earlier words back in his face. Also, you could kind of see it as him threatening him here a little bit. Oh, you'd be a fool to give that up. Like, I know. I could tell him. And then Brian walks out of the hotel room completely naked. He's just carrying his clothes and like, what if someone's out there? What's his plan? I guess he's gonna get dressed in the hallway because he wants to get out of there as soon as possible. A part of me also thinks that the way the bellhop looked at him before when he was going into the hotel room, it kind of feels like he's gonna go find the bellhop and get it on with him instead. But maybe that was just there for the whole like...
Christ, isn't anyone straight anymore?
Do we think that the bellhop did things with Marvin before Brian got there? Anyways, I guess Brian just wants to get out there super quickly and so he's not worried about getting dressed. David drives Michael home.
So you want to come up?
Oh, I can't. I've got my first patient at 7:30.
Michael kisses David and then immediately goes down to give him a blowjob.
I asked you out because I wanted to get to know you better. because I wanted a quick fuck.
David isn't interested in that, I guess, and Michael leaves. I like this shot here of him being framed by like the door window thing. I don't know, but I guess he thought that, I guess why would he think that he wouldn't want that? I don't know, whatever. Anyways, it was a bold move, and he did it right away. So Ted is back at Babylon.
I'm just strictly here as an observer.
Yeah, so what else is new?
Oh, nice, Michael. You know what happened last time, right? Emmett is really happy that Ted is back. Michael is still wearing Brian's clothes, even though we saw him get dropped off at his apartment. He could have changed, and he didn't.
Maybe he has a prostate problem. Or only one testicle.
Why wouldn't he like you? Same reason as everybody else. I'm not Brian.
That is such bullshit.
See, Emmett's really not a big Brian fan. Also, I like that he's calling out Michael on this. Like, he's not disagreeing with him. He's just being like, well, that's not true. Kind of seems like Michael is projecting here, as we know that he likes Brian.
Maybe he's the old-fashioned type. Doesn't fuck until the second date.
Well, I don't care. I'm gonna go find somebody who wants me.
I mean, wow, like, he really can't wait until the second date? Because David did seem like he wanted to see Michael again. I guess if you're used to only ever hooking up with people, when someone then doesn't want to do that, it must be like, oh, he must not like me then because that's what you do with people that you like. Like I said, he's still wearing Brian's clothes. So is he still trying to be like Brian right now and kind of channel him? You know, David, he thinks that David didn't like him because he wasn't Brian, so now he's gonna go be Brian. You know, he's wearing his clothes and he's going to the back room. Brian shows up at Melanie and Lindsay's house.
Sorry I missed dinner.
Don't apologize. It doesn't become you. And don't think you can flash that smile and get away with it. That might have been cute at 20, but at 30 it's starting to get pathetic.
Ooh, burn. So she's kind of starting to put her foot down about this. He usually gets out of everything without even trying, flashing a smile because he knows that she can't help but reciprocate that. So I think we're kind of seeing Melanie's influence on Lindsay here. And she's also angry that she fought so hard to get Melanie to agree to the dinner, and then he didn't even show up for it. He was proving Melanie right.
Have you eaten?
No.
So the smile still works. Oh, the way he kind of smiles here and shakes his head. I don't know, like I just feel like he's being really real and honest with her. Whereas he's usually putting on a front for the world. And here he's just so comfortable and real in himself because that's how he feels around her. Okay, I'll stop going on about their friendship now, but I love it. So we see that Michael is in the back room of Babylon, walking through the back room, and the song Sexy Boy starts to play. It continues to play over these next two scenes that are kind of intercut together. So then we cut to Brian holding baby Gus. And I really love this song. I love the song for this moment and everything. So Lindsay comes in the room with a plate of food for Brian, and he's just laying on the couch holding baby Gus in his arms. He looks like he's kind of talking to him and smiling, and then Lindsay smiles. Brian's holding him, and she just looks kind of surprised and happy because, you know, this is what she wanted. This is what she hoped would come of her having his kid. He's really finally connecting to his child. He did before too, but now, you know, it's a lot more. He's realized not only how important Gus is to him, but also how important that Brian wants to be to him. He doesn't want to expect Brian or want Brian and then be disappointed. He's realized that he really wants to be there for him and connect with him. And so that's what we're seeing here. Him connecting with him and him showing up when he said he would. So he's really committing to this. He's not, you know, busy living out there and then completely forgetting about his son, which is what Marvin is doing. And, you know, Lindsay really hoped for this. She hoped that him having a kid would make him truly connect with someone on this level, and it would help him commit to something and to someone other than himself, and just give him someone to love unconditionally and who loves him unconditionally, and, you know, some responsibility and all of that. But she's, you know, kind of finally seeing that what she hoped for is coming true. So Michael finds a guy in the back room, and the guy that says he's fantastic, and we're treated to this really creepy Michael look. Brian is holding the baby, and it looks like Brian has fallen asleep, and the baby's still on his chest. So we end on Michael in this green light, green with envy. Wants Brian? Why doesn't Brian want him? I don't know, maybe not. We see a lot of different lighting colors in Queer as Folk, and I think a lot of it is just for the aesthetic. Some of it's not, but, you know. Oh, and maybe part of the reason why Michael was so upset over this whole thing with David, because he's also like, why doesn't Brian want me? You know, what's wrong with me that Brian doesn't like or doesn't want me? What's wrong with me that he doesn't want me? So then when someone else that Michael has the potential of really liking or falling for eventually at some point, when they come along and he thinks that this person doesn't like him, it kind of brings up that whole Brian thing too. So Michael tries to be Brian because he thinks that that's what people want. I mean, it's what he wants, it's what Justin wants, it's what Marvin wants, and so many others. But he doesn't realize that David doesn't and wouldn't like Brian. He likes Michael and who he is. But then again, he's himself with Brian, and Brian still doesn't like him like that or want him. So anyway, I love this song at the end. These last two scenes, we're cutting back and forth between Michael not acting like himself and not really knowing who he is, with Brian finally being himself when he hasn't really been for most of the episode, and him knowing and being content with who he is and who he wants to be, which is someone who's there for his son and family, and Marvin isn't. So I really like this episode. I also feel like I say that about every episode. It also feels like there's a whole lot going on. Like I almost feel like I just watched more than one episode. So the running theme seems to be honesty and being who you are. Also there's the title, now approaching the line. Obviously Brian has found that line that he has to draw, and he draws the line at doing something that he doesn't want to do in exchange for money basically, but more importantly also him realizing that he wants to be there for his kid. He wants to be there when he's needed, and he's always going to show up. So Justin started to mend his relationship with his mother. He was honest about who he is and made it clear that he's going to live his life how he wants to. And then she lets him know that she's always going to love him and be there for him. Something that, again, Brian realized that he's going to do for his son too. Justin also stopped running, which is nice. Brian realized that he wasn't being true to himself or who he is, so he changed that. Michael still isn't being honest with Tracy, nor was he honest about himself to David, and he had a bit of a crisis about who he is, and he didn't really feel wanted, which led to him acting like someone else. Also just seeing how much he's wrapped up in Brian.
Belongs to my friend Brian. He looks better. He can look good in anything. He even looks good in nothing. When he walks into Babylon, heads turn like police lights just to look at him. Everybody wants him. Besides, he's not even interested in me.
Why wouldn't he like you? Same reason as everybody else. I'm not Brian.
And yeah, so lots of stuff in this episode. Lots of stuff relating to the themes of the episode. I loved the stuff with Jennifer and Debbie. And Jennifer and Debbie in the diner was just fantastic. And then the stuff with Jennifer and Justin. I'm really glad we made some headway on that. I also love the stuff with Brian and seeing him be a bit more of a father to Gus. We also got introduced to a new character, Dr. David Cameron. And I actually liked a lot of his scenes and his interactions with Michael, for how he was coming off in this first episode at least. And it's interesting to see a gay male character who's at a different point in his life compared to all the rest of the gay male characters on the show. And we see that he wants different things. He likes to go on dates, he likes fancy wine, serious stuff, and the restaurant and all that, compared to what we've seen so far. And I love that ending of Brian holding Gus. It's just such a cute and incredibly beautiful moment. So overall, a great episode. That was season 1, episode 5 of Queer as Folk, now approaching the line. Next week is season 1, episode 6, The Art of Desperation. Do all those things that I always ask you to do. Like, subscribe, comment, etc. Let me know your opinions on what I said. Also, let me know how you guys feel about Dr. David, or more specifically, how you feel about Dr. David when he first is introduced, or how you felt when he was first introduced. And if your opinion on him changed or not, I don't know, let me know. Bye. See you next week.